After overcoming an impasse with the Norwegian mediating party, the dialogues between the Venezuelan government and sectors of the opposition resumed in Mexico. The migratory crisis in South and Central America worsens. Nearly 20,000 migrants huddled in Necoclí, Colombia, expect to cross the border with Panama. And Germans voted in parliamentary elections on Sunday. Preliminary polls show Olaf Scholz's Social Democratic Party narrowly ahead of Armin Laschet's Conservative Party. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada, and now we begin with the news. The dialogues between the Venezuelan government and sectors of the opposition resumed in Mexico on Sunday. Both parties overcame the impasse that threatened the negotiations. The delegations ensures that they will work together in order to comply with the agenda stated in the Memorandum of Understanding signed on August 13th, with the mediation of Norway and with the support of the Netherlands and Russia. After the government delegation requested the Norwegian mediators for an explanation for declarations made in the framework of the UN General Assembly. The head of the government delegation, Jorge Rodriguez, confirmed that he maintains his expectations on the success of the talks.
Activities with the unitary platform. We hope that the meetings will be fruitful and constructive as we already have.
Is there any agreement on issues like the judicial system? And you have sent a message to Mr. James Story.
You will release news soon. Thank you.
In Colombia, the migratory crisis is worsening in the border municipality of Necoclí, where over 2,000 migrants, mostly Haitians, are waiting in makeshift tents to be able to live on the boats that will take them to the department of Chocó to continue their journey towards the U.S. Close to 2,000 people have been waiting for more than a month to leave the Chocó department. They are currently taking shelter in makeshift tents, even made of garbage bags. Many of them are waiting to buy a ticket to go, but according to the shipping companies, the tickets are already sold out until October 17th. It means the warners are just wait longer, hence stranded and gathered there. This situation extends to other problems, like accumulation of garbage, and the health authorities say the minors are having respiratory problems, diarrhea and skin rashes, with no medical attention but the Red Cross, attending up to 120 people daily. The municipality has been overwhelmed and unable to attend all this population. We will provide more details in upcoming news briefs. And we remain on topic. Authorities in Panama said that the crisis caused by the massive presence of Haitian migrants should be treated as a regional crisis. Migration representatives pointed out that in the last few days, Panama has received a flow of migrants that is 5 times bigger than the amount agreed with Colombia. They affirmed that 72% of the people who arrived into the Central American nation claimed to be residents in the neighboring countries. At the same time, the massive arrival of Haitians to Mexico continues. The situation worsens if we take into account that thousands of other Central Americans arrived to the country to reach the U.S. border. Thousands of Haitians are stranded under the bridge linking the cities of Acuña in Coahuila and Del Rio in Texas. There is also a significant number of migrants in Mexico City and thousands more waiting to be attended at the southern border. The Mexican Commission for Aid to Refugees, COMAR, reported on an exponential increase in refugee applications by foreigners of Haitian origin, most coming from Chile and Brazil. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador referred to the causes of uncontrolled migration in the region and his government's position on this regional crisis.
We don't want Mexico to be a migrants' camp. We want the problem to be faced from its root, that people are not forced to emigrate. Otherwise, we will continue holding them, putting them in shelters and not going to the root of the problems. For instance, there has been no investment in social development.
However, the U.S. Secretary who were camping under the Texan side of the border bridge have already left the place. Mayorkas pointed out that less than a week ago there were about 15,000 undocumented migrants in Del Rio, Texas. He also highlighted that near 8,000 voluntarily returned to Mexico. More than 5,000 were transferred to the U.S. migrant processing centers along the border, and 2,000 were deported to Haiti in 17 flights. According to U.S. authorities, since September 9th, border guards intercepted nearly 30,000 undocumented people in Del Rio, where they lived in precarious conditions after crossing the Bravo River from the Mexican city of Acuña. Meanwhile, in Chile, racist protesters burned the belongings of migrant families who were camping in the square in the northern city of Iquique. In the framework of a march against migration organized by sectors of the right wing, violent groups, mainly made up of upper middle class people, set fire to clothing, mattresses, tents, toys, and even a baby's car. Those were the belongings of 150 migrant families who were camping in Plaza Brasil, waiting for a humanitarian response from the Chilean state. On Friday, the families had been violently evicted by special forces of carabineros that left 14 detained and several injured. Human rights organizations described the events as a consequence of the policies of the Sebastián Piñera administration that assimilates migration with delinquency and encourages an escalation of pre-electoral racist violence. The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, ratified that he will eliminate repressive laws against workers and reaffirmed his support to the Minister of Labor, Iber Maraví, who is besieged by the opposition, who has demanded his resignation. The Peruvian head of state met with representatives of the country's labor unions at the Lima Convention Center to respond to labor demands. During his speech, Castillo asked Minister Maraví to eliminate the repressive laws that threaten labor rights. He also assured that they will provide all the conveniences to have united, firm, and strong unions at national level, where no one is left behind and everyone is heard. Meanwhile, he called for unity and to consolidate the organization of the working class, while also criticizing the temporary hiring modalities of employees with reduced labor rights. And Pope Francis on Sunday called for an inclusive world and urged the people not to close the doors on migrants, as the Catholic Church marks the World Day of Migrants and Refugees. During his Sunday's Mass in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis encouraged people to take special note of the Angel's Unawares sculpture in the square, which depicts migrants and refugees from all cultural and racial backgrounds and from different historical periods. Earlier, the Pope denounced border closures, a measure he described as the root of many evils in history and of the absolutism that has often maintained dictatorships and extreme violence towards those who are different.
Today, we celebrate the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, which this year has the theme, Towards an Ever Greater Us. It is necessary to work together without prejudice and without fear, placing ourselves beside those who are most vulnerable, migrants, refugees, displaced persons, victims of trafficking, and the abandoned. We are called to build an even more inclusive world that excludes no one.
We'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The Social Democratic Party has beaten Chancellor Angela Merkel's Christian Democratic Union by the slim margin of 1.6 percentage points, according to preliminary official results. In these elections, citizens were called to choose the lower house of the federal parliament, the Bundestag. At this point, Social Democrats have won 25.7% of the vote, ahead of the Christian Democratic Union, which dropped down to 24.1%. The Greens maintained their position as the third largest party, followed by the Free Democrats, the Nationalist Alternative for Germany, and the Left Party. Once the final results are announced, the leading party must begin negotiations to form the new government of coalition.
The most important topic, the climate policy, was important, but I would have liked it to have been a bit more focused and to have known who really want to do what.
Family policy was important to me, and I have to say that it got a bit lost in the whole election campaign. I hope it will become more important now.
Also, in Portugal, more than 9 million voters were called to vote in local elections to renew 300 city halls and municipal bodies. Attention was focused on the abstention rate, which in the last local elections reached 45%. Over 20 political parties have been registered, although the big winner is expected to be the Socialist Party of Prime Minister Antonio Costa, that rules the country since 2015. Among the main challenges facing the Portuguese municipalities are completing the process of decentralization of powers, reversing the 2013 administrative reform, and monitoring the COVID-19 crisis. And Swiss voters have backed same-sex marriage in a referendum held on Sunday. More than 60% supported the measure, which will bring the country into line with most of Western Europe. Switzerland was one of the last countries in Western Europe where same-sex marriage remained illegal. The country has allowed same-sex couples to register partnerships since 2007, but some rights are restricted. The measure will take it possible for same-sex couples to adopt unrelated children and for married lesbian couples to have children through sperm donation.
Extremely happy to see that the result is worthy of the work invested, of the campaign and of the state. It is true that it is extremely positive and that I am in fact surprised. I expected with the campaign we had in front of us to see less cheerful results. What we can see is that the Swiss people have indeed given a very massive yes in the ballot box.
This is a historic day for Switzerland, a historic day for equal rights for people of the same sex who love each other, and a symbolic day for the whole LGBT community. Yes, it is really a very important day.
The high-level general debate of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly continues on Monday, as heads of state and government offer their annual addresses. Friday saw the high-level dialogue on energy, a collateral event that sees the participation of 100 member states and brings together heads of state and government, as well as business leaders, foundations, and international civil society and youth organizations to mobilize commitments and actions in terms of energy. In his address to the high-level debate at the UN General Assembly on Saturday, Narendra Modi reaffirmed India's commitment to democracy, highlighted its great strides in developing and manufacturing COVID-19 vaccines, and warned against countries with regressive thinking. The 76th General Debate addresses pressing issues affecting the international community, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, vaccination rollout, and preparedness ahead of future health crises. Climate change and action to tackle it are also a key feature of the discussions. During his speech at the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov pointed out that the United States is trying to impose a global order governed by double standards.
The latest example in the U.S. proposal to hold a so-called Summit for Democracy. The participants will be determined by the U.S. of course. The U.S. believes it has the right to judge in its own point of view whether the rest of the country are democratic or not. This initiative is essentially aligned with the Cold War mentality. The U.S. declared a new ideological war against its dissidents.
Lavrov also warned that there are persistent attempts to diminish the role of the United Nations organization in solving the world's problems.
For Russia, it's obvious that threat and challenge can only be addressed effectively through concert effort, in strict compliance with universally recognized principles of international law, the purpose and principles in the UN Charter. The UN must play a central coordinator role in global policy, unleashing its full potential for
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Evacuations have begun in the coastal Indian states of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh ahead of the expected arrival of Cyclone Gulab. The phenomenon is expected to start the landfall process from Sunday evening, and the country's meteorological department has already issued a red alert for both states. The Indian Navy has kept naval ships and aircraft on standby for rescue and relief operations. Some trains were cancelled and some others rescheduled for the safety of passengers and the train operations. Besides Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, several other states such as West Bengal, Chhattisgarh and Telangana have been put on alert for heavy rainfall. Thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes to escape rivers of lava cascading from La Palma's erupting volcano. Cumbre Vieja resumed activity after a short stop. The eruption suddenly paused on Monday morning as surface activity at the vents and volcanic tremor ceased. Scientists stated that it was too early to determine whether it indicates the end or just a pause in the eruption, but it is better to assume that it is only a pause. Earthquakes have picked up again a bit, which suggests that magma pressure has increased underground and magma might be trying to find new pathways. During the past 24 hours, there were 17 quakes of magnitudes from 2 to 3, the largest a 3.2 quake 11 kilometers from south of Los Llanos de Ariadne. Hundreds of people gathered in a march in Kiev on Sunday to demand more effort from the Ukrainian government to combat climate change. The activists carried banners and flags and led chants through the center of the capital toward the parliament building. Protesters called on authorities to increase funding in the state budget for measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, adapt to climate change and other environmental measures. The rally comes just weeks before a major UN climate summit, COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland.
So today we invite people to join the climate strike. This is part of the international movement, and our main demand is to provide more funding for climate and nature conservation actions.
We have to be united. We have to be, acting under the same demands, basically doing things together. And this is exactly what climate marches are. Moments to bring like-minded people together and to show how many people actually care.
So today
1 million doses of the Cuban anti-COVID vaccine Abdala has arrived in Vietnam. The first batch arrived in Hanoi on Saturday, in the night, on the plane of the Vietnamese President Nguyen Xuan Phuc. The mandatory returned to his country after concluding an official visit to the island and attending the UN General Assembly in New York. The batch includes 900,000 doses acquired by Vietnam and 150,000 more than were donated by the Caribbean nation. Last September 20th, the Vietnamese authorities signed an agreement with the Cuban Center of Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology to buy 5 million doses of Abdala vaccine. Nicaragua received on Sunday a batch of over 490,000 doses of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine through the international COVAX initiative. This is the fourth such shipment made by COVAX to Nicaragua through Spain. The shipment was received by the Minister of Health, Marta Reyes, and the Presidential Advisor on Sanitary Issues, Sonia Castro, at the capital's international airport. With this shipment, the Spanish donation to Nicaragua reached the figure of 1,130,000 doses that allow the progress of the national immunization program against COVID-19. Since last Monday, Nicaragua's health authorities began voluntary vaccination campaigns for people aged 30 and upwards. In the United States, hospitals on the West Coast began rationing medical care after the Delta variant of the coronavirus brought the healthcare system to the edge of collapse. In the western states of the U.S., medical personnel have been faced with the difficult decision of how to allocate the limited resources they have. They state that treatments have been applied according to the convalescent's possibilities of recovery, which affects anyone seeking emergency care, not just to those affected by this disease. According to federal data, until last Friday, intensive care units in Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, and Texas exceeded 90% of its capacity, while Alaska and Montana were 84% and 77% full, respectively. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.